Ki ngā maunga, ki ngā waka, ki ngā tātai tangata, nā te rei o mihi kia koutou, tēnā koutou. So as you've heard, I am Sara Templeton, and this is me and a couple of my kids. I am just entering my second term as a Christchurch City Councillor, following 3 years on the Hagley-Ferrymead Community Board, and before then doing a whole pile of post-quake, earthquake volunteering while I was at home looking after kids and a break in my teaching career. So I'm currently the chair of the Sustainability and Community Resilience Committee of the Whole, the new committee set up that combines two committees from the previous term, looking at both climate change and community resilience and all of that that entails. I'm relatively new to cycling. I mean, I biked a lot as a kid, loved it, biked to university, but was one of those with large hair when the helmet law came in, and decided that my mode of transport wasn't going to suit my hairstyle. And so pretty much stopped biking at that point, and it was really common, and cycling numbers had already been falling significantly in Christchurch and around the country, and that was one of the things that kind of sealed it. But I found myself 6 years ago chairing a community board which had recommendations to the council on routes for the new major cycleways, and I discovered as I sat around the table with 6 others trying to work out what we thought was the best route for a cycleway to go from Ferrymead into the CBD. And people were discussing it, and staff would give us their opinion and tell us what they'd looked at, and some of it seemed kind of counterintuitive, and we were like, yeah, not sure about that. And then I checked in with people, and none of us out of the 7 had biked any of the routes. None of us owned bikes, and we hadn't even biked the routes that we're making recommendations on. Decided that this was not good governance, and so did a bit of research, and being a working mum, juggling the community board and family commitments, being incredibly at that point really overweight and unfit. I did a lot of research and I bought myself an e-bike, and I've had it 4 years now, and I just haven't looked back. It has been a transformation for me, and especially 3 years ago, first getting elected to council and just having a full-time job where I worked in the CBD and just started using it for transport. It gave me enough base fitness that I started doing a bit of jogging, and then 2 years ago I bought myself a regular bike. They do exist. It's, one of those Dutch style, mint green, basket on the front, rides on the weekends with the kids, and then enjoyed that. It's a bit far to go in my work clothes for 10k from home to work most days, so I still use the e-bike for that. And then I injured my knee just over a year ago, and did something that I never in my whole entire life thought I would ever do. And I bought Lycra and a road bike. And you'll find me now sometimes on the weekends up on the Port Hills, and just love that, especially because some of it's closed to cars still. So I am currently a local living example of how providing good public infrastructure can change behaviours and change lives. And my kids now see that they think that they'll never even own a car. And 2 out of the 3 don't ever even want to get the driver's licence. And I just think that's fantastic. I bike and I bus, I occasionally carpool, and in January this year I sold my car. And so that's been a big journey for me over 4 years, and I've done a range of other bits and pieces as well. So why am I here? Because we can't continue as we are, business as usual. It's very, very clear. We have climate change, and we're already feeling the impacts of that. Christchurch is a low-lying city, and we are already having greater floods than we did before. The earthquakes dropped a lot of the land levels, those kind of things. We have congestion through our cities, we have air pollution, we have a health crisis with huge levels of inactivity, and some people, walking less than 300 metres in a day, hopping into their car that's attached, in the garage that's attached to their house, and then getting out of work. And so the business as usual, as we currently see it, is not sustainable. But it wasn't always this way. And And Christchurch uniquely has this opportunity to do something a bit different. The earthquakes of 2010 and 2011 and then subsequent have given us the opportunity to do something we had looked at previously. So we'd actually had Jan Giel over, or the architects over, 2008, 2009. And they'd given recommendations of how we could revitalise our city centre, make it more people-friendly, mainly at that point, I think, for economic reasons. And the council at the time had decided it was just too much, too expensive, and it was going to be too controversial. But we now have a plan. Some of you may recognise this. It's the blueprint. We have lots of plans in Christchurch. We have many, many plans, including the blueprint. You can read those. I'm just going to focus on the major cycleways network map because I'm here talking about transport. So 2-3 councils ago, they decided that one of the things they would do as part of the rebuild is to build a proper network of cycleways, mostly separated, though some neighbourhood greenways. And it's been somewhat controversial, as it is across the country and across the world, putting in this kind of infrastructure, because it's not business as usual, though it used to be. And we are partway through. We have 4, nearly 5 complete, and sections of others done. The program was originally designed to do 5 years, but it's actually taken us a lot longer and been more expensive than we had originally planned. So it's going to be over 15 years to build the network of 13. I did hear one councillor reported, a previous councillor reported as saying that the original budget, which was around, I think, $67 million, wasn't what they thought it would cost, it was what they thought they could afford. Which isn't particularly good budgeting, I don't think. So let's tell people what we think they want to hear about how much it's going to cost instead of what we think it will really cost. But it's working, and this is some of the local data that we've got at the moment. We've got both quantitative and qualitative work, and on the right of the screen there we've got SmartView, and I don't know if any of you have seen that. It's our council website, smartview.ccc.govt, and it's got a whole pile of live data. So these are our live cycle counts, so they're weekly counts updated daily. And this is from another presentation I did, so I don't know when that one was, but some of those numbers are up around sort of 10,000 a week, crossing some of those two-way ones, which is fantastic. And there's this huge network of counters now across the city. The other day, as I went to Hagley Oval for the cricket, I was number 1929 across Antigua Bridge for the day, which was pretty cool at 6 o'clock in the evening. And qualitative data, we stopped about 700 people in the street on cycleways and said, roll, what would you have done if this cycleway hadn't been here? Many of them would have cycled the route anyway, some of them would have cycled a different route, but 15% of the people biking on those cycleways would have driven a car instead if it hadn't been there. So that's really good data as we're going forward. 50% were cycling to work, but actually there's a lot of people just going about their normal everyday business, doing other things on bikes as well, or just out for a ride. But you guys all know this. Everyone wants progress and no one wants to change. So the Share an Idea consultation that happened post-quake was very clear that people wanted a greener, more people-friendly city. But as soon as council starts trying to do greener, more people-friendly things, there's pushback. And so we've seen a series of newspaper articles and commentary, and I don't know if you read the comments online. I know I shouldn't, but I do. But it's depressing at times, and it's very loud. So we've got here, I don't know, it's not easy to read. More bloody vanity projects. Yeah. And this one here. So our CBD was put through in the blueprint to be 30 kilometres an hour, but there was a misjudgment about where the edge of the CBD might be, and so we needed to extend it to St Asaph Street, which made a lot of sense. And although the rest of the CBD was already 30k, and people were seeing that it made sense because it had been in for a while, and even the talkback commentators and stuff were saying, actually, I didn't like it to start with, but I can kind of see, I kind of get it now. But, St Asaph Street, it's anti-democratic because 66% of people are against it. And that was a really tough one for council. There was very clear evidence of safety concerns, a lot of people crossing the street mid-block, many of them looking at their phones, high numbers of pedestrians in the area because of the new laneways, and cars were still, and the lights were set for 30, but the cars were speeding in between the lights to try and get up to 50, and I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. And right next to a cycleway that goes along St Asaph Street too. So the council that never listens to feedback, bring on the next elections and fingers crossed we get some councillors elected who will listen to their constituents. Pleased to see that every councillor on the Cycleways Committee got re-elected. One changed councils, but we all came back, which was pretty cool. And there was a lot of commentary around all the people involved in cycleways being thrown out, and it just seemed not to be the case. And then there's things like this. So I said something incredibly controversial and inflammatory, right? I said that we are creating a city for the future by making it low carbon and sustainable. Clearly controversial. I mean, I don't know if you can see, there's 307 sort of things there, 480 comments. It did get to up over 600 comments before I stopped checking. And a series of comments, and some of them are generic, right? Some of them are, 225 million on cycleways, and let's see how many cyclists actually use them. All I can say is I'm glad I don't live there anymore, but you're definitely effing up a great city. I was like, ah. And of course, Kelly Monk, who was this beautiful 80-year-old woman drinking something there, thinks I am a complete effing muppet. I read the comments because you like to know the types of arguments that people are using so that you can try and communicate something. I don't know, probably a waste of time, but there has been movement. And in fact, I don't know, just quietly, he did say it on the radio. Chris Lynch, who runs this Facebook page, has I don't know if anyone News Talk ZB, Christchurch is Mike Hoskins, is looking at buying an e-bike. So, there's movement. So I did what any self-respecting Muppet fan would do, and I changed my profile picture. And Scooter's always been my favourite. Always been my favourite, Scooter. Works behind the scenes, really eager, and trying to get things done even when there's chaos around him, and I like him a lot. So he was my profile picture for about a month. And yeah, because actually politicians are people, right? And you'd like to think that everyone that gets elected goes in and they sit around the table and they get shown the evidence by staff and they make the decisions based on the facts and evidence in front of them. And it's not the case, because there's 17 people sitting around the council table, and we're just residents. Like, I'm just the mum with 3 kids down the road, right? We're residents who have put our hands up to help guide the city and make some of the big decisions that need doing. And by law, we don't have to just make fact-based decisions, but by law, in the Local Government Act, we need to take into account community views and preferences. And sometimes they're strong, sometimes they're not very well informed, and sometimes minorities are louder than the silent majority. And so it's really not easy to do all of that. The St Asaph Street thing, for example, I was on the hearings panel for the St Asaph Street speed limit change. And while 66% of people were against it, submissions ranged in quality from kind of thoughtful with good reasons to the one that sticks in my mind the most is one that just ticked, no, don't want you to change it. And the comment was, just stop it, you dicks. But everyone's community views and preferences are equal. So things happen, and I'm going to run out of time. So what helps? Local data. Local data helps enormously because, as we have been told time and time again, we are not Copenhagen. We are not Amsterdam, even though we are on average drier, warmer, flatter, have more hours of daylight than either of those. But when you have local data that shows that over 50% of people in Christchurch hopped on a bike in the last year, and many of those do it really regularly, That's really good data. We've also got more local data on our school bike shed count. That's 1986, so not recent. That's Burnside High School, so that's when I was at Burnside High School. And that's what our bike shed looked like, and that is June. She is in a winter uniform. And so kids will bike to school in the middle of winter in their long skirts. But going from 75% cycling in 1979, Burnside's now at 9% of kids biking to school. And other schools across the city are the same. There's an article in the Star about it yesterday. But along the Unicycle route, I don't know if you guys know the Unicycle route, it's a beautiful cycle route that goes from the university into the city. Christchurch Boys High School, which are kind of one of the highest rates still because they've got a good, strong cycling culture, has gone from, in 2016, 19% of their kids biked to school. And that's when the Unicycle opened. In 2018, 25% biked to school. Girls High School, also along the Unicycle route, in 2016, 5% biked to school. And in 2018, 2 years after the Unicycle route opened, 15% bike to school, so a leap of 10% there, which is fantastic. And so as we collect more data showing that actually we're not different to the rest of the world, that really helps. The facts aren't enough though. Stories are really important. Normalising cycling, engaging early with people and having conversations both with the public and with city councillors and the people making decisions is incredibly important. When we consult on our long-term plan and our 10-year $10 billion budget, the Cycleways program was the 5th most commented on project in council, even though we didn't ask a specific question on it, but it was the one that got the most positive support in the entire program. And those things make a difference to how decision makers operate. We need a mandate from residents and we need good expert opinion. I know that when people turn up to hearings panels or write submissions and turn up and talk to councillors about the decisions, when we have people turn up who work in professions that have good expert knowledge in these areas, it makes a difference to our decision making. And one of the things I'd like to do today is to encourage you all to engage with your council. Some of you work at councils, I recognise a few faces in the audience, but to engage and to engage widely and to encourage other people that you know to submit on proposals, because it does make a difference. You don't always get the right outcome and there's always compromise, but it's so much better than it would have been if these people had not submitted. And that makes a difference long term. And long term's important because we tend to overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we achieve in a generation. And you look at those women suffragists who, you know, biked around Christchurch collecting signatures with no suspension and no tar seal on the roads. Not once, not twice, but 3 times they had to do that petition to get women the vote. And it takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of persistence. And it took us 30 years to get from where Rebecca was looking for her bike in the Burnside High bike sheds in their photo in June 1986. And it's going to take us a lot of time to get back to a city that has a more people-centred transport infrastructure. And we need to be deliberate, we need to be focused, and we need to be persistent. Kia ora. Thank you.